Hello, successful and soon to be successful traders. Chris Capri, SecondsGuysForex.com. Next lesson in this series right now, in terms of risk, money management, your trading performance, has to do with a critical formula called the risk of ruin. And the scope of this lesson is really about discussing the risk of ruin and why you need a percent-based risk model to really calculate your trading performance in an accurate way while saving yourself a massive amount of time. So let's get into the risk of ruin. Many of you are familiar with my stuff. Have heard me talk about this before. We're going to go a little bit more in depth in it right now so you can kind of understand what this is about and why it's important. Risk of ruin was originally created for casino games, basically. So it was used to determine somebody could, walk into a casino, play some blackjack, and know what they had to perform at, what their stats had to be, so that they wouldn't blow up their accounts. If they walk out there with, making money, and they needed to figure out ways to know how can they protect their downside and make sure that mathematically they're going to make money. The risk of ruin, the abbreviation I use for it is ROR with a little O. It's kind of a strange equation because when you look at the number, the result you're looking for is zero. Most people think of zero as making no money, but in actually zero risk of ruin means that you have zero chance of ruining or blowing up your account. What it also means, as an inverse correlate to that, is that you have 100% probability your account will not blow up, and the implication of that also is that you will make money. If there is a 0% chance that you're going to blow up your account based on your particular stats, then that also means mathematically you are going to make money. It doesn't determine how much, it doesn't determine other variables, but it does determine that you'll protect your capital, you will not blow up your account, and you will mathematically make money. So this is a lens and a perspective to help you determine your edge and profitability, which you talked about in the first video. Now, there are three basic variables to the risk of ruin formula. And so the variables are the payoff ratio, which is plus R per trade. We've talked about what plus R is. There is accuracy in percentage, and there is percent risk per trade. Now, luckily, we have created a risk of ruin calculator for you on the website. You can find it here. In fact, you can go to my website, hit the search button, type in risk of ruin, and you'll find it. So this is the risk of ruin calculator. So let's say you have a system that on average grabs 1.5 R per trade, and you are currently 40% accurate, and you're wondering, hey, am I going to make money if I make 100 trades at 40% accuracy and my average gain is 1.5 R per trade? Well, assuming you risk 1% per trade, you hit calculate risk of ruin, and it gives you a number of 55.93%. That means you have a 56% chance of blowing up your account, which is incredibly high. It's incredibly high. Now, what is interesting about this in terms of the risk of ruin is it really kind of, when you start to toy with it, it gives you a lens into profitability. If we were to decrease the risk per trade, does that increase or reduce our risk of ruin? It does. It shows when we reduce it to 0.5% per trade that we have a much lesser chance of blowing up our account. Still, 31 is high. But the point being made here is that how much you risk in percent equity per trade really has a massive informational benefit to whether you're going to blow up your account or not. And when we reduce this to 0.25, we can see our risk of ruin goes down tremendously. Originally it was at 56%, now it's down to about 10%. So it's 1/5 of what it was, which is tremendous. Now let's go back to that 1% calculation here, where you realize you have a 56% chance to blow up your account. You want to see how powerful accuracy is. What happens if I increase my accuracy to 45%? Just 5%. Risk of ruin goes to 0. So by over 100 trades, if you were to win 5 more trades out of 100, you don't have to gain any more per trade. You don't have to change your equity percent risk. Just gain 5 more trades out of 100, and you mathematically can ensure that you will make money. In fact, where is that number? 44 is, 0.002 is so low that it's almost next to nothing. 43, now 0.42, so 42, 0.12, and 41. Now we're at 2.93%. Now, my experiences with the risk of ruin tell me that anything higher, first off, your goal should be 0, but anything higher than 1% is really too much. You really want to make sure you avoid getting anything over 1%. You want to keep it in a fractional percent. This gives you so many statistical odds in your favor that it's highly unlikely you're going to lose money. But what this does show with this risk of ruin calculator is that how much you risk per trade matters tremendously, and just 1% of accuracy can have a massive impact upon performance. Remember, at 40% accuracy, you have a 56% chance of losing money. If you can just win one more trade out of 100, that goes down to 3%. So it shows you that each percentage accuracy has a massive impact, and that just increasing your accuracy by 1% or 2% may not seem like much psychologically, but mathematically it has a massive impact on your profitability. Now, what if we go back to this person at a 56 chance, this trader at a 56% chance? What if we increase the payoff ratio by 0.25? So we make it to 1.75 now. Or we'll just do 1.7, because I can't do, for some reason, 2 decimal places. Look at what my chance of risk of ruin goes from 56% to less than 1%. So if I am risking 100 pips, and on every win I gain an average of 150, at 40% accuracy and 1% risk per trade, I have a 56% chance of blowing up my account. But if I can gain just 20 more pips per trade, my risk of ruin goes from 56% to less than 1%. It shows you not only how fragile profitability is, but that just an extra 10 pips, 15 pips, 20 pips can have a massive impact upon profitability over the long term. So this is the benefit of using the risk of ruin calculator, because it really starts to unpack plus R per trade, accuracy percent, and percent equity, and how all of those impact your account. Each one has a massive impact. And when you start to see just getting a 1% gain in accuracy, and maybe even just increasing your profit targets by 1%, all of these things combined can mean the difference between winning and losing money, between losing money and being break even. The difference between becoming a losing trader and actually becoming a profitable trader. And I think this is a very important experience for traders to have, because once they start to do this, they really start to see how close they are to profitability. That just changing one of these variables, a couple percent, can mean the difference between them being where they are and being a professional trader. And when you start to increase all of these variables in your favor, performance gets enhanced massively. It's a massive impact. So I suggest for sure that, not for sure, I suggest that, and I recommend it highly, you become very familiar with this, you play with it, and you start to look at your numbers. Because I know it may seem like a huge distance between where you are now and profitability, but it's not as far as you think it is. It's much closer than you think it is. It might even just take one small adjustment and you're there. So work with this, become intimate with it, so you can really see how, it might be hard to increase accuracy in your system, but maybe you can add on an extra 10 pips per trade. And you can see how that would have a massive impact. Or maybe you can reduce less per trade. You don't have to change anything in your system, just reduce less per trade. And you could change that from a non-profitable to a profitable system. So take some time to really dig into your numbers, explore this, work with this, mess around with it, so you can kind of really have this as a living experience for you, and how powerful the risk of ruin is in determining performance. Now, with that being said, I am an advocate of the percent risk-based model. And I know there's some people out there who kind of tend to produce and market these really confusing narratives about risk, but after this slide and this lesson, it should be very clear why you want to shift to a percent-based risk model. So first off, and I'm going to give you 7 reasons, and I can do this in just a couple minutes. So first off, you cannot calculate your risk of ruin directly if you're risking a fixed dollar amount per trade, but you can if you're risking fixed percent per trade. If you're risking a fixed dollar amount, you have to do the extra calculation per trade to determine what your risk of ruin is. That is a massive amount of work, unnecessary work that you don't need to do. That's number 1. And we see how important it is to understand your risk of ruin. Number 2, as your account grows, you can always tell if somebody's trading professionally or not and whether they're trading decent size, because no hedge fund or bank trader on the planet is measuring their risk in terms of dollars. Eventually, the numbers become so large that there's no way to know whether I'm risking a certain percent per trade, a certain amount of my account. You have to constantly make different adjustments. But if I set all my trades to risk 0.5%, 0.25%, 1% per trade, there are tons of algorithms, there are tons of EAs now and widgets that allow your platforms to do that for you. So you know exactly how much it is, you know how much you need to do in terms of position sizing. But I guarantee you, anybody who's working with large numbers is not thinking, oh, I should risk $10,000 per trade on this. Because once you start getting into like hedge fund numbers and institution numbers and bank numbers, the numbers become too much to calculate. So you can always tell when somebody's trading size or professionally because they are using a percent, because there is no calculation to make in terms of how much money should I be risking in my account. You can quantify it super easy. But if I just set a fixed number, $50,000, as my account grows and contracts, that number doesn't really match with the account. Just in pure quantifying, doing the pure quantitative analysis of numbers that you have to do, there's nobody who's trading with large size that is thinking in dollar amount. They're thinking in percent risk. Number 3, if you want to get funded, investors want to know how much your percent risk in drawdown is. They're not looking for your drawdown in terms of capital. They're looking for your drawdown in terms of risk, because that they can translate. They can translate, hey, okay, if you were to tell them, what was your max drawdown? You say, oh, my max drawdown was $48,622 this year. They'll be like, okay, well, that's meaningless to me. I don't know if that's a lot of money or what. How big's your account? They have to start doing that and figure out the numbers. They're like, oh, wow, that's this kind of drawdown. Investors want to know how much of their max risk capital is going to be at risk per trade, per week, per month, max drawdown. So if I put in $1 million, if I'm an investor and I'm going to put $1 million in an account, and this trader tells me, hey, we're only going to risk 15% of your account, I can quantify that. But if they're telling me, oh, well, I only lost $48,000 on my account, I can't translate that over to my account. I then have to ask them, how big was your account? Then I have to do the calculation. I have to convert that calculation into a percent. And then I have to do that in terms of my account. It's 4 steps for just 1 step. Investors are going to want to know how much percent risk is going to be exposed. They're not thinking in dollar amounts. They're thinking in percents. Number 4, max risk per day, week, month, year is too dynamic in dollar terms. So people who say you need to risk a fixed dollar amount per trade and then you can adjust that as your account grows and things, you have to constantly recalculate that based on your account's always in flux, always in flux. You know, to constantly have to readjust that dollar amount so that you know you're risking the same amount per trade based on the size of your account is ridiculous. You're going to have to calculate that before and after every single trade. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's very much like, and it kind of leads into the next point where I talk about percent risk. Percent risk is an equal part of the pie of your account for each trade while the balance changes. So these 2 points kind of correlate to each other. So what do I mean by that? If I am risking 0.5% per trade whether my account is $500,000, $1 million, or $10 million, that I'm always exposing the same amount of my account. So if I lose any one trade, I only lose 0.5%. Dollar amounts, I have to constantly recalculate that and do extra calculations. If you think about it, it's kind of like, let's say, calories in diet. So if I know I need to consume 3,000 calories per day to give my body the fuel to build on muscle mass, well, if I increase my muscle mass, my body's going to require more calories. So I have to know exactly how much my body is requiring based on whether I'm getting bigger or smaller, whether I'm increasing muscle mass or decreasing. If you just say, oh, I'm only risking 25, or I'm only eating 2,500 calories per day, and then I'll change that when, at 150 pounds, and I'll increase that only when I get to 200 pounds, there's going to be a lack of performance and calorie consumption needed to fuel your body. So that's the kind of metaphor I'm thinking of in terms of this. The percent risk model allows you to make sure that you're always risking the same amount no matter how big your account is. And this is critical. This saves you so much time, and it allows you to do more advanced calculations in terms of understanding performance. Going back to point 4, max risk per day, week, month, year, you need to know exactly how much you're risking per trade, week, month, and year so that you know, okay, I only want to lose, I'm only willing to risk 5% a month, 10% a month. Because I know I might have a max losing streak of 3 months in a row. So if I'm risking 5% a month, then I know I'll never lose more than 15%. Try and do those calculations in dollar terms as your balance increases and decreases. It's a royal pain in the arse. We'll talk about max risk per day, week, month, and year in one of the later lessons in risk management and how you can kind of, come up with these models. But it should be pretty clear which is a much more straightforward approach and which reduces, the calculations you have to do. Number 6, using percent-based risk model distances your thoughts about money. If you're saying, I only risk $5,000 per trade. Okay, so I'm only going to risk $5,000 per trade. When you make that trade and you adjust your position size and be $5,000, you know exactly how much is at risk, $5,000. The thing about it is just the very thought of $5,000 can trigger all kinds of unconscious thoughts about money. Wait a minute, $5,000, that's my mortgage payment. That is what it costs to pay off my insurance for the year. That's what it costs for my health insurance. That's what it costs for this. Wait a minute, that's a lot of money. If I lose this, I might lose my mortgage payment. Holy shit, maybe I should lose it. It can spawn all these thoughts about money and what that means for you and all the different things about it. But when you think about percent risk, it's kind of innocuous. It's neutral. It doesn't create any sort of thoughts about money because you're not thinking, oh, well, I lost 1% per day. Well, how much is that my mortgage? I have no effing idea. I have to calculate that. Because it's like several steps away and calculations away from you being able to understand how much it means in terms of your everyday life. But we are very clear as to how much $5,000 means to our everyday life. Our days, our weeks, our months, our yearly expenses. We know how much that matters, but we don't know about percent. So we're psychologically reducing the chance that we're going to get sidetracked by all these thoughts of money. Lastly, recovery. Recovery is when you go into a drawdown, how much you need to make to get back to profitability. If I tell you, if you started with a $100,000 account and you're down $45,000, you know you have to make $45,000 back up to get there. The thing about it is that $45,000 is kind of a strange, okay, how much does that mean? I don't know. But let me tell you something. Let me put this in a different perspective. If you have a 50% drawdown on your account, your recovery to get your account back to break even, you have to get 100% return to do that. That's something we can understand. Wow, I have to make 100% return on capital to get my account to break even. That means something. We can understand that. We can translate that. We know what it's like to get 100% gain and what that requires from us, especially if we know what our strategy should be doing on a year-on-year basis. If you know your strategy is only going to average about 20% a year, you now know 100% return is quite a lot. It's going to take you some time. So recovery, you can't calculate recovery in terms of percentile without knowing your percent risk exposed and you're using a percent risk model. Otherwise, recovery as a whole, which gives you more information? I need to make $45,000 to get back to break even. Or I need to make 100% return to get back to break even. We know exactly which one is more informative, which one really kind of paints the picture more clearly. I could give other reasons, and maybe when we go into more advanced calculations about performance and risk and management, that we can dive into why you need to use this model, but it should be pretty clear at this point why you need to use a percent-based risk model. So with that being said, I hope that this risk of ruin and percent-based risk model exposure was useful to you. It clarified things to you. It amplified your understanding of the risk of ruin. And also, what are the two real main takeaways? The main takeaway about a percent-based risk model is understanding how much easier it is for you to do the math, to really get analytics and get a clear perspective on your trading performance and what you need to do. The main takeaway of the risk of ruin model is that the dividing line between you and performance is much smaller than you think. Just changing one variable can have a massive impact. And when you can start to really make legitimate change in 2 or 3 variables, you're going to have a massive impact upon your performance and profitability. Most people who are not making money think the gulf between them and making money is huge. Most of you probably think it's insurmountable. It's this large distance. But in reality, it's much closer than you think, and it's probably it's in the next room. It's in the room next to you. You just got to pass through this door, and that's it. And this door could be your plus R per trade. It could be your percent accuracy. It could be just reducing the risk per trade. Don't get me wrong, that's going to be work, but it also shows you that this gulf and distance that you have to bridge is not as far as you think it is. And not only that, we know 3 bridges we can take to get there. So I look forward to your comments and questions on this. I'm really hoping that this changes your perspective on performance, risk, and profitability. And so I expect, and I'm looking forward to the discussion on this. I'm sure it's going to kind of spark some new ideas and things in your mind. So with that being said, I look forward to the comments and questions and discussion on this. And I will see you inside the course.